The last sunrise over Jupiter wasn't a sunrise at all. It was a red shiver across the broken limb of the planet, smeared like old blood along the atmospheric crest. What light remained was borrowed, not cast by Sol, but refracted through the gravitational sheath of the eclipse scar, twisting sunless rays through unlit space. The storm bands no longer moved. The great red spot had collapsed into a spiraling void years ago, its once majestic churn now a slow leak of vapor into the orbital graveyard. Moons that had survived the first collapse drifted in erratic spirals, trailing dust and frozen oceans. Io's volcanic heart had gone cold. Ganymede had split in half. High above, the Ark's Salus orbited in silence. 3 kilometers of alloyed warplate and black glass panels clung to the station's spine like ribs to a carcass. Once built for deep-orbit defense, the Arks had long since shed its armaments in favor of shielding. Its forward bastion, now sheathed in cracked ablative glass, still bore the melted stubs of kinetic batteries and railgun turrets. The war was over. Not won, just over. What remained was less survival and more inertia. A slow drift into extinction, held aloft by failing reactors and ancient gravity engines humming beneath layers of radiation-scabbed plating. Commander Nara Vex stood within the bridge cruciform, where old command rails still bore the dust of Martian blood. She did not speak. She did not blink. She watched, her breath coiled visibly inside the dry, freezing air of the command tier, leaking through the side vents of her rebreather collar. The bridge had been dehumidified decades ago to preserve oxygen reserves. What passed for breathable air now was a thin ration, flavored faintly with copper and decay. A field of orbital debris shimmered in the glass before her, the remains of Callisto Station, now drawn into the event horizon. Fragments tumbled in frozen procession. Airlocks, hull segments. A lone navigational light still blinked, its logic loop unbroken even as its parent structure lay vaporized. The scar was growing. A chime cracked the silence. Harsh, sudden. She turned. "It's accelerating," said a voice. Dr. Aaron Solari approached, carrying a translucent data sheaf wrapped around his fingers. The material glowed faintly, alive with equations too vast for most minds. Aaron did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on Jupiter's corpse. "Neptune's last telemetry confirms dislocation vectors. We lose the outer orbitals within 5 days. Pluto's tether array already collapsed. Nothing beyond Saturn remains synchronous." The alert light above the viewfield flickered. Once, then again. Behind Aaron, one of the terminal banks pulsed to life. "You seeing that?" he asked, voice lower now. Vex stepped past him. Her hand hovered above the console. On screen, a proximity warning. But nothing was near. A signal repeating. No source. No timecode. Then a voice. Not from the speakers. From the metal. "Nara," it whispered, in a child's cadence. Then silence. She exhaled sharply through her collar. "Loop the audio," she ordered. Aaron obeyed, but the system refused to play it again. It was gone. Vex's jaw flexed. "We'll be gone before then," she said at last. Aaron hesitated. His hand tightened around the data sheaf. "If we go at all. You haven't approved the Seraphim launch." Vex turned. Her eyes were grayer than steel. Not in color, in temperature. Cold-forged. Final. "You're still afraid it's a trap?" She nodded once. Not yes. Not no. Just a quiet concession to uncertainty. The scar had not emitted light, nor heat, nor signal for 9 years. But 3 days ago something had changed. A lattice of harmonic frequencies had rippled through the deep black, not language, not math. Memory. An encoded resonance that bypassed rational filters and etched itself directly into perception. "It spoke to you," Vex said. Aaron looked down. The data sheaf dimmed. "It showed me her. My daughter. 5 years old. Dead on Earth." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Grief required no translation aboard the Arks. The silence between them lengthened. Vex turned back to the window. Beyond Jupiter, the scar pulsed. Not visually, not radiologically, but through sheer spatial pressure, as though the fabric of reality flexed around an invisible core. The center was a darkness deeper than space, an anti-light that erased vectors. Even the Ark's orbital path had begun to curve, dragged inch by inch toward the anomaly. Instruments showed no force, yet mass shifted. Time fractured. She spoke only once more that day. Prepare the Seraphim. We launch at dawn cycle. In the bowels of Ark's Salus, where no sunlight had ever reached, the divecraft waited. The Seraphim was not built. It was grown. A sheath of black biomechanical plating shaped like a blade. It hung suspended in a magchamber, humming with low sympathetic resonance. Grown from a Jovian warseed in nutrient gel, it had no schematics. Its design had emerged through iterative growth algorithms and genetic accretion. No engines, no heat, no hard lines. It breathed in silence, alive with artificial nerves. A ship not made for movement but for immersion, meant to navigate the non-space of the scar. Inside the embryonic cockpit, a single figure was already awake. Row 7 stood motionless in the dark. Their form was humanoid but wrong. Limbs too smooth, head too narrow, chest ribbed with fiber musculature that pulsed faintly with light. Not machine, not flesh, something in between. Forged from Jovian war genetics and data-spliced alloys during the Hollow Wars, a conflict that left every moon of the outer system coated in bone dust. They were never meant to sleep, but something stirred now. A low pulse in the neural gel beneath their feet. Row tilted their head. A flicker across the inner lens of their vision, an image. Cathedral. Fire. A woman crying through static. Words they didn't know spoken in a voice that had never existed. They steadied. The memory stem flared briefly, then went still. They turned toward the Seraphim's core. A single pulse ran through their spine. A gesture of readiness. The vessel answered. Neural tethers whispered in response. Biochemical currents surged. A dreamless synchronization began. At the top of the arcs, the final council convened. There were only 5 now. Once, the command will held 32 sovereigns of the fractured planetary systems. Now it was Vex, 2 Venusian engineers, a lunar archivist, and the ageless speaker of Europa, a woman so old her blood ran in tubes outside her body. The room was built for grandeur. Concentric tiers, old banners of Earth and Mars bleached by radiation. Now the lights flickered. Moisture clung to the rafters. Emergency rations sat openly on the table. "This is not sanctioned," said the archivist. "We were to preserve knowledge, not chase illusions." "Preservation ends in vacuum," Vex said. "Extinction has no archives." "And if it's a lure?" asked one of the engineers. "If the scar is intelligence, not phenomenon, and it wants us inside?" Vex paused, then replied, "Then we answer. We don't hide in the dark while it eats the sky." The speaker of Europa moved slightly. Her voice was air through cracked vocal plates. "There were other doors once. The old gates. Earth broke them. We said we would never open another. We didn't open this one," Vex said. "But it's here. Now. And it's choosing." No one argued. Not truly. The vote was symbolic. The Seraphim would fly. The scar would receive them. And humanity's final question would descend with it. In the quiet sleep cycle before launch, Aaron sat in the observation ring alone. He held a shard of glass in his palm. Ancient. From Earth. Burnt at the edges, melted into slag during the final orbital fires. Embedded inside, a print of his daughter's fingers. She had pressed her hand there, once, laughing, before the sirens began. The scar had shown him that moment. Not as memory, as invitation. He turned the shard, letting the starlight, what little remained, glint along its surface. The ghost of warmth passed through his fingertips. He saw her again, not in the glass, but beyond it. In the vector, in the pull. From the corner of the ring, a console flickered. The lights dimmed, the station rotated, and far below, the Seraphim shuddered into motion. The dive would begin at false dawn. No light, only descent. Ash had no scent in vacuum, but the wreckage drifting past the Seraphim's hull bore the shape of burned memory. It was the remains of Kepler's womb, once a vast orbital birthing lattice over Neptune's third moon, Triton. A crowning achievement of the reclamation age, it had housed over 10,000 embryonic vessels in permanent low-grav gestation. Now it was a crown of twisted girders and ruptured cryopods spinning slowly in the black. Rows of growth chambers floated free of their housing. Some were open. Others still held what they were never meant to release. Thin limbs. Transparent eyelids. Mouths that never opened. Their forms had not decomposed. Only frozen. Inside the Seraphim no one spoke. Row 7 piloted in silence, their body locked into the ship's neural frame. A dozen thin strands, living fiber, snaked from their spine into the flight organ. Light pulsed where nerves met alloy. No control sticks. No console. Only touchless integration. The cockpit was a womb of its own, quiet, dark, fluid damp with chemical memory. Aaron Solari sat behind them, eyes fixed to the main feed. He marked each passing structure with quiet recognition. This wasn't supposed to be on the route, he said quietly. They sealed Kepler years ago. The ruins weren't supposed to drift this far. Ro did not answer. Their voice only emerged when the ship required it and the Seraphim had not spoken. Fragments of hull plating passed like bones. Names scrawled in blackened paint. Infant registry codes. Genetic sequence tags. A tattered Earth banner curled like dead skin. The signal beacon was still active, a looped transmission of a lullaby, degraded and glitching. Aaron recognized the tune. He'd sung it once, years ago, to a child now buried beneath a cratered ocean. The words had faded, but the melody cut straight through. Ro blinked. Their head tilted faintly. The Seraphim paused its drift. Ahead, a mass occluded the stars. Station fragment, Ro said, voice like cold breath over steel. Occupied. The feed zoomed. What at first seemed debris took shape. A spire, torn from its mooring, now drifting on residual spin. On its hull, a series of human figures anchored. Not suited. Not moving. Frozen bodies, affixed manually. Some fused to the metal. Others posed upright, tethered by cable or piercing bolt. All faced the scar. Each wore symbols of legacy, tattered mission patches, diplomatic seals, or religious totems. One bore a golden mask of ancient origin etched with Martian script. A shrine, Aaron whispered. Or a warning. He reached to magnify. One of the faces was covered in gold foil. Another wore a Martian envoy seal. A third, a child barely grown. Their eyes were open. The Seraphim hummed with rising tension. The neural gel around Ro's body began to vibrate. Something was interfering, not from the scar, but from the spire itself. Intermittent pulses. Microgravity oscillations. A resonance that bypassed conventional encryption. Ro twitched. Their breath hitched. Backtrace signal, initiating interface, they said. Aaron turned sharply. No. Don't touch it. But the Seraphim was already threading contact. A pulse snapped through the tether link and the screen went black. Then light. Too much. A field of fire. Screaming. A child running down a corridor. Her voice calling a name that wasn't Aaron's. Walls rupturing. A red horizon cracked by orbital bombardment. Then darkness. On the Ark Salus, Vex watched the dive feed rupture. For 6 seconds, the screen showed nothing. Then a single phrase. We remember you. She turned to the comms officer. Cut uplink. Re-establish on the isolated quantum band. The officer obeyed, hands trembling. Far below, the divecraft spun slowly in the dark. On board, the lights returned. Ro gasped. Not air. Reflex. Their fingers trembled. They looked down at their chest as if expecting to see blood. There was none. But the imprint remained. A hand. Small. Pressed against their armor. Aaron reached for them. Ro. The pilot did not speak. They drifted away from the shrine. And the scar grew larger in the glass. The arcs fell into night cycle. What lights remained were red and low, casting the corridors in soft arterial glow. Vex stood alone in the memorial wing before a wall of etched names. No bodies had ever returned from Earth. Only fragments. Dog tags. Charred bone. In one case, a sealed handprint burned into ceramic. She looked at the empty slot beside her sister's name. She had never filled it. Behind her, the Europa speaker approached. They passed the ash crown, she said. You know what that means. Vex nodded. The dead are watching. In the scar's reach, the Seraphim began to vibrate again. Not from motion. From memory. Thousands of signals. Threads of life once lived, echoing forward in radiation patterns that no device had ever learned to translate. And yet the ship translated them. Not in words. In sensation. In grief. Ro began to shudder. Across the pilot's inner feed, flickers of pre-coded directives attempted to overwrite the emotional search. They failed. The ship allowed it. Aaron placed a hand on their back. It was warm. Human. You're not alone, he said. Ro looked up. Their voice module activated unintentionally, a tremor of sound with no meaning. And for the first time, they wept. Not tears. Not fluid. But memory. The scar filled the forward view. A hole in space. A door without a frame. Its edges writhed subtly as if the laws of light bent inward at the threshold. The dive was no longer theoretical. It had begun. The Seraphim crossed the scar's threshold in total silence. There was no jolt. No shudder. No visual cue. The stars did not vanish. The glass did not crack. One moment they were within known space. The next they were not. Even the laws of movement refused to confirm entry. Thruster readouts blinked out. Mass calculations dropped to zero. Time fractured. Aaron Solari felt it first, a loss not of sensation but of sequence. The moment of crossing came to him as déjà vu. He blinked and saw Ro's silhouette twice, once with their hands still tethered to the neural web and again with them already turned to face him. Their eyes, silver slits beneath the biosynthetic helm, reflected a light that hadn't yet arrived. Then the light changed. Not color, not brightness, but orientation. Illumination no longer obeyed direction. It radiated from impossible angles, casting shadows both forward and behind. The interior of the Seraphim shimmered in recursive patterns, surfaces reflecting into themselves, hull curvature feeding back into non-Euclidean shapes. The ship bent gently, not structurally, but topologically. Inside the cockpit, space curved like cloth. A sound began. Very faint. Almost too high to hear. A whisper without voice. Ro exhaled without breath. Their systems were still functioning, but only locally. No signal from arcs. No position anchor. Their internal stabilizers spun without solution. Temporal axis, nonlinear, they said. We have entered phase dissonance. Aaron nodded slowly, but his eyes did not move. They were fixed ahead, or what counted for ahead. The scar had an interior. He had expected void. Black. An absence. But what lay within was a cathedral. It was not made of stone, or steel, or light. It was composed of intervals. The rhythm of stars forming and unforming. Walls of compressed memory, not data but living impression. Emotions fossilized into geometry. He saw towers that felt like morning. Arches curved with the gravity of final farewells. Veils of unspoken guilt hung in layered haze across the vaulted nothing. Then they passed through the veil of the first structure and the past collided with them. Aaron stood alone in a chamber of glass. He was not aboard the Seraphim. He was on Earth. But not the Earth he remembered. This was a recreation, the way memory stitches dream from grief. The sky was wrong. Too many moons. The trees flickered as if rendered in unstable time. Shadows moved faster than the light. And yet, at the far end of the field, a girl was running. Her laughter rang through fractured air. She turned to wave. He tried to step forward. Pain. A fracture along the base of his spine. Real pain. Physical. Neural implants in his back surged as if reacting to false gravity. His legs buckled. The grass underfoot disintegrated into glass. From somewhere behind him, a siren began to wail. A distorted voice called his name. Not hers. The vision ruptured. The Seraphim spun violently. Inside the cockpit, Ro howled not in sound but through raw EM discharge. Their systems were under assault. Not by weapon but by proximity. Every inch they crossed within the scar brought another pressure. Another buried command. Emergency subroutines from battles long gone were triggering. A Jovian strike directive activated and aborted in the same breath. Atmospheric calibration spun into violent loop, seeking a pressure that no longer existed. Then came a voice. Ro. Not from Aaron. Not from the ship. From themselves. Execute. The word emerged in a child's voice. Then another, suppress. The second came in a soldier's growl. Contradiction. Memory overlap. They shook. Spasmed. Tendrils recoiled from the neural interface, writhing like severed nerves. Past and present converged in their memory stem. A girl's scream. The sound of pulsed rifles. A corridor flooded with bioluminescent blood. A final order spoken through dying teeth, you are not meant to feel. Aaron lunged forward, heart pounding. He seized the tether collar at Ro's spine and twisted. The neural mesh tore loose with a hiss of fluid and protein vapor. The cockpit went dark. The Seraphim stabilized. Inside the central chamber, backup systems engaged. No orientation. No coordinates. Only drift. Readouts displayed concepts instead of measurements, sympathy rising. Temporal drag steady. Integrity compromised but preserved. Ro lay motionless in the neural cradle. Their eyes were open but unfocused. Internal vitals pulsed irregularly. A fragment of an old Martian war hymn played from their vocalizer, static-ridden and incomplete. The tone was elegiac, a funerary march. Aaron collapsed beside them, panting. The heat in his chest wouldn't subside. His hands trembled. Sweat beaded along his spine despite the chill. He clutched Rose's wrist. Come on. Come on. He scanned the readouts. All biolinks intact. No direct damage. Only corruption. He sat against the cradle's edge. Tried to breathe. The air in the chamber no longer tasted of recycled filtration. It was sweet? Wrong. He ran a hand over his skin, tiny filaments clung to it as though the ship itself was breathing with him. It's not empty in here, he said aloud. It's structured. No reply. Just the hum of slow systems and the war hymn fragment playing again. This time he recognized the line. We burn so that others remember. Outside, the scar changed. The cathedral dissolved. In its place, orbitals, rings, stations, an array of planetary structures hanging suspended in inverted gravity. One was labeled Titan Base 9. Another bore the United Venusian directive seal. None should exist. All had fallen long before the scar opened. But here they were intact. Alive. 1,000 possibilities suspended in what should not be. Simulations? Echoes? Aaron didn't know. Some rotated gently, others blinked in and out of phase. He could see lights in the windows. Movement. Aaron activated passive scan. Signals returned. Thermal. Biological. Then a ping. Human. He looked up. On the far edge of the scar's field, drifting gently toward the center, was another ship. Not Seraphim, but identical. Same hull. Same curvature. Same registry. Its cockpit was dark. Its lights cold. But on its underbelly, scrawled in scorched font. Solari. Aaron felt his chest tighten. He accessed the forward sensor. Zoomed. Inside the cockpit, a man. Slumped forward. Face obscured. But the posture. The shape. It was him. He rose slowly. Walked forward until his face touched the cockpit glass. The scar did not move. But everything else did. Drifting now toward himself. Toward memory, toward recursion, toward the impossible architecture that waited ahead. The cathedral had collapsed, but something new was forming in its place. A ring of fractured arcs. Wreckage pulled from 10,000 collapses. Remains of ships not yet built. The dive had not ended. It had just begun. Darkness was not the absence of light. Inside the scar, darkness was presence. It had texture, grain, weight. It moved when not observed. It pressed against the hull of the Seraphim in places where space should have been empty. No sensors could measure it. No scans could define its mass. But it was there, folding inward. Aaron Solari watched as the stars were devoured. Not extinguished. Consumed. One by one, distant lights blinked out, not with distance, but with proximity. As if something just beyond the skin of reality was feeding slowly, with method. Each one fell into silence. No radiation. No flares. Just a clean erasure. A curtain being drawn across the sky. The process didn't resemble collapse. It resembled editing. Beside him, Ro had not moved. They were still recovering, still curled within the cradle of the pilot nest. Their systems had rebooted 3 times without full restoration. The vocalizer loop had ended, replaced now by silence punctuated with pulses of unknown symbols appearing in the inner visor. Their eyes tracked the dark. Are you seeing this? Aaron whispered. Ro's voice returned as a modulated whisper. The unlight. That was the only name they gave it. The darkness that moved. It had begun to take shape. Ahead of the Seraphim, the space between orbitals began to ripple. What once appeared as void now showed curvature. An outline. No surface. No sheen. Just contour made visible by the distortion of everything behind it. Like seeing a predator through steam. Aaron adjusted magnification. The shape was humanoid. Not in form, but in suggestion. Proportions implied familiarity, but nothing biological held. Limbs like trails of burnt silk. A face that was not a face, but a mask stretched tight across memory. Behind it, thousands of eyes blinked in and out of configuration. Not eyes of the creature. Eyes of others. Observers? Victims? It sees us, Rose said. How can you tell? Because it's becoming what it needs to be. The unlight moved. And the Seraphim moved with it. They did not initiate thrust. The vessel did not burn fuel. But the scar pulled them deeper, bending their trajectory with a force that had no vector. It simply became the dominant frame of reference. The unlight flowed around the ship but never touched it. Not yet. They passed through an orbital ring labeled in old Terran glyphs. The inscription read Project Eidolon. The structure was massive, easily 40 kilometers in diameter. hollow inside, containing what appeared to be a star. Only it was not. The object radiated no light, no heat. It pulsed instead with memory. The Seraphim's systems dimmed automatically as they approached, as if shielding against something more invasive than radiation. Internal notes in archaic Martian script identified the ring as a failed mnemonic anchor, a device meant to trap consciousness, preserve human legacy against universal entropy. Aaron gasped. Before his eyes, he saw his mother's hands. The moment she died. The angle of the sun through the window of a home long burned away. The bitter citrus of disinfectant. A tremor in her fingers. He closed his eyes. Opened them. The moment remained. It knows us, he said. Ro had disengaged fully from the neural nest and now stood, unsupported, at the edge of the observation dome. Their body was tense, flexed slightly as if bracing against something unseen. It remembers us, they replied. Behind them, the Seraphim shuddered. The forward compartments, where redundant life support systems remained dormant, began to cycle open. There should have been nothing there. But light spilled from the cracks. Not white, not red. A light the color of forgetting. Desaturated. Static-toned. It bled into the cockpit like mist. And from it stepped a figure. Aaron reached instinctively for the emergency panel. Ro held up a hand. Don't. Not yet. The figure was tall. Wrapped in flight cloth worn thin by radiation. Their face was hidden beneath a reflective mask, convex and expressionless. But on their chest, a nameplate. Solari. Aaron backed away. Every step felt heavier, as if the pressure gradient had shifted subtly around the figure. What is this? A recursion, Ro said. Or a retrieval. This is not your first descent. The figure took another step forward. The hull did not register mass. There was no change in pressure. No sound. Just presence. Aaron stared at the mask. The reflection within was not of him. It was of Earth. Blue. Whole. Alive. And burning. Ro stepped forward. They approached the figure slowly, their boots whispering against the deck. The figure did not move. When Ro raised a hand, the recursive Solari mirrored it. But only partially, as if remembering the gesture, not performing it. Ro's hand paused just inches from the surface. I remember this, they said softly. I wasn't here, but I remember it. The Seraphim began to vibrate. Outside, the unlight reached forward. Its arms stretched and fell across the orbital ring. The memory star at the center flared once, not in light, but in sensation. Grief poured through the chamber like a physical wave. Every screen on the Seraphim blanked. Then filled. With people. Not ghosts. Not recordings. Full presences. Faces from life displayed in sequence. All of them dead. All of them watching. Their expressions were not mournful. They were anticipatory. Among them, Aaron saw a girl. Hers. She did not speak. But she smiled. And then she vanished. The others followed. Like pages turning in a book that no longer wanted to be read. The Seraphim slowed. Or time slowed. Or perception halted. The interior lights began to pulse in arrhythmic intervals, mirroring old neural patterns designed to counteract synaptic drift. A futile gesture. The unlight turned its head. If it had a head. The mask of memory flared once. The recursive Solari figure stepped fully into the cockpit. Their movements did not disturb air. Did not displace shadow. They raised one hand. And pointed forward. Through the dome, a shape emerged. Not structure. Not ship. A spiral. Spinning slowly around nothing. A helix made of impossible vectors, each arm trailing particles that glowed with remembered pain. The spiral drew in not mass, but recollection. Every revolution pulled another thread of memory from the walls of the scar itself. Past battles. Lost voices. Dead suns. Its center was absence. Its destination unknown. The pull was beginning again. And then Ro whispered. The heart of the scar. Their voice was calm. Resolved. The recursive Solari stood silent. Waiting. Watching. The unlight withdrew behind them like a curtain closing. The dive continued. And the light behind them began to die. What should have been empty was not. The Seraphim entered the spiral drift at subrelative velocity. But speed had no meaning inside the scar. Distance bent. Scale inverted. The further they descended, the more the laws of reality yielded to suggestion. Not just physics, but memory. Orientation itself began to obey emotion more than mass. Mass faded. Mass was opinion. Ro no longer tracked coordinates. Their systems operated on a new axis, proximity to trauma. The ship responded to grief, not gravity. And in that logic, they came upon the ghost orbits. First was a city. It turned slowly around a dead moon, held in geostationary lock by chains of frozen light. Earth-style architecture, mid-21st century urbanism. Skyscrapers bent at unnatural angles, as if sculpted from recollection, not design. Rooftops layered with garden terraces no one maintained. Windows were lit, but with no apparent power source. Doors ajar, curtains moving without wind. The Seraphim creaked, not structurally but sonically. Its hull groaned in response to proximity, as if reacting to phantom pressure. A sound distant, wet, echoed across the comms. Falling water, rain. But there were no clouds. Figures moved inside. Human silhouettes, distorted at the edges. Walking, pausing, sitting. None acknowledged the Seraphim. Their pace was habitual, cyclical, like rituals repeating for an audience that no longer existed. Echoes, Aaron said. Ro replied, or simulations derived from embedded loss. This is an architecture of regret. A school bell rang. A child crossed a courtyard, then froze, head turned. Watching them, the child's face shimmered with noise, like corrupted video. Her eyes were bright, focused. She opened her mouth as if to speak. The signal feed spiked. Then the image fragmented, twisting like data under pressure, and she vanished. Next came the fleet. A graveyard of ships drifted across the spiral, some intact, others torn open mid-maneuver. War-era Mars dreadnoughts, Venusian exploration barges, Terran deep migration arcs, dozens of craft with designs not present in any known registry, prototypes, or remnants from futures that had never arrived. One was identical to the Seraphim, not similar, the same. Aaron initiated a proximity scan. The registry confirmed, Seraphim 1. He stared at the hull. Carbon scoring along the dorsal ridge. A breach along the port spine. And across the cockpit glass, a single handprint smeared in dried blood. Small. Too small. The ship rotated slightly. Its airlock was open. Inside only dark. Should we dock? Aaron asked. No, Ro said. It's us. Not now. Not this iteration. Aaron's voice lowered. Is this a warning? Ro paused. Or a memory we haven't made yet? The deeper they fell, the more they unraveled. The spiral narrowed. They passed through a cloud of frozen debris. Not metal, but bone. Thousands of skeletal remains suspended mid-motion. Some wore armor of pre-fall design. Others wore formal attire, suits, gowns, badges of station. One still gripped a musical instrument, a violin. The bowstring was drawn taut, as if frozen mid-note. There was a station here once, Ro said. Long before the scar reached us. It was erased, not destroyed, forgotten. Aaron watched as the violin drifted slowly, strings intact. Music played through the comm array. No one had activated it. The same note looping, a minor interval, unresolved. Ro reached toward the control panel, tapped it once. The music ceased. Further in, the Seraphim entered a corridor of orbits. Dozens, hundreds, each a ring of structures, satellites or monuments. Some geometrically perfect, others torn, frayed, or only half-constructed. One looped a chain of cryopods connected by pulsing strands of artificial nerve. Inside each pod, a human face. All identical, all sleeping. Aaron leaned in. One of the faces was his. Younger, not scarred, peaceful. He recoiled. They cloned us. Ro didn't answer. They stared at the line of pods in silence. In another ring, an old Earth battleship sat broken in two, each half rotating counter to the other. Between them, a garden. Real soil, oxygen atmosphere, trees bent in gravitational tension, their roots exposed to vacuum but thriving. Ro leaned forward. This place was built, then unbuilt. Aaron checked environmental feeds. Signals came back clean. Is any of this real? Ro turned. Their voice lowered. Does it matter? Deeper still, they encountered the temple field. A ring of vertical monoliths arrayed in concentric formation around an invisible center. Each monolith pulsed with rhythmic bursts of electromagnetic static. Language, not Terran, not Martian, something older. The scar speaking through relics. As the Seraphim entered the perimeter, the pulses changed. The monoliths shifted, not moved, but rotated, turning slowly to face the ship. A deep tone rang through the hull. Subsonic, felt in the bones. Aaron stared at one of the glyphs. It rearranged itself. His name appeared, then his daughter's, then Vex. Then the glyphs erased themselves. Ro closed their eyes. It's learning. The monoliths dimmed, then fell silent. In the final orbit before the spiral tightened into singularity, they saw her. A woman, standing on the exterior hull of a station fragment. No suit, no tether. Her eyes were open, her arms outstretched. Not frozen, not dead, alive, and watching. She looked like Vex, but she couldn't be. She opened her mouth. No sound came, but Aaron heard her. Don't turn back. Then she was gone. Not faded, rewritten. The scar had edited her. The Seraphim crossed into the inner spiral, and there was no more orbit, only fall. Fall had no sound. It was motion without wind, direction without resistance. The Seraphim descended on a spiral too vast to perceive yet too close to escape. Inside, time began to drip instead of flow, thick and uneven. Lights flickered out of sequence. Ro's limbs moved with micro-delays as if their body now translated thought through a different medium. The scar was thinning. Reality had not broken, but it no longer answered. It listened. Aaron Solari stood at the main viewport, watching the spiral curve below like the inside of a shell. No light source. No terminus. Only contour alive with movement he could not name. The walls of the spiral weren't made of matter. They were made of memory. Streams of events, moments, sensations. Some he recognized. Some he had buried. The scar was not taking them somewhere. It was taking them inward. And somewhere ahead, a signal. It began as rhythm. Not language. Not code. A child's heartbeat. Accelerated. Hesitant. Then slow. Then steady. It pulsed through the Seraphim's hull without sound. Every system registered it as ambient radiation, though nothing came from outside. The waveform wasn't electromagnetic. It was biological. Ro tensed. Their breath hitched, though they did not breathe. Their gaze locked forward. It's in me, they said. Aaron turned. What is? The signal. I think it's not just using me. I think it is me. Or part of me. A copy. A resonance. They raised one hand. The skin along their forearm flickered, images flashing beneath the dermal sheath like underwater film. A forest. A cradle. A face. Then another, a different face, but the same child. And another. 10. 20. Aaron stared. Those are lives. Ro didn't answer. Their eyes were wet. Are those yours? No, Ro said. They might be all of us. The Seraphim adjusted course unprompted. Its limbs flexed, adjusting to a new layer of descent. The inertia did not pull. It persuaded. The scar grew denser. What had been abstract became anatomical. Structures emerged from the dark. Bone towers. Tissue bridges. A maze of pulsing walls, red-lit and vascular. The ship descended through what appeared to be a planetary wound suspended in consciousness. The structures flexed and breathed. Capillaries throbbed against the hull. One passed over the viewport and paused as if sensing. Aaron recoiled. It's a nervous system. It's more than that, Ro murmured. It remembers dying. Sensors failed completely. Mass was undefined. Light was memory. The Seraphim passed into the heart wall. And in the center, they found the child. Not metaphor. A girl. Floating at the core of the spiral. Wrapped in threads of soft light. Hair drift. Eyes closed. Her skin was luminous. Her body impossibly still. The signal pulsed again. Aaron pressed to the viewport. That's not possible. It isn't, Ro agreed. That's why it's true. The child opened her eyes and looked directly at them. She knows us, Aaron whispered. She is us, Ro replied. The Seraphim halted. No sound. No engine. No resistance. A single tendril of light extended from the spiral's heart. It touched the ship. Did not breach. Did not burn. It wrapped once around the central dome, then thinned into a waiting thread. It requested entry. Ro stepped forward. I'll go. Aaron moved to intercept. Wait. Ro paused. They turned toward him. Their voice wavered for the first time. I think this is what I was meant for. Not war. Not orders. Not hollow memory. This. to carry something home. They reached out. Aaron took their hand. Ro smiled. Don't forget me. Even if I do. The outer seal opened without protest. Atmosphere held. The tendril waited like a bridge suspended across nothing. The airlock cycled open. No pressure loss. No vacuum. No alarms. Only invitation. Ro stepped into the light. And vanished. Inside the cockpit, Aaron stood alone. The signal no longer pulsed. Only stillness remained. He sat beside the empty cradle. His hand rested on the torn tether they had left behind. The artificial nerves still pulsed faintly as if echoing what was just taken. The forward window cleared. The spiral continued. But now it was transparent. He saw through it. He saw the layers between structure and sensation. Memory rotating like planetary belts. His childhood. His wife. The last light of Earth. Then he saw her. The girl. Not outside. Inside the Seraphim. At the center of the cockpit, barefoot, eyes luminous. Every panel dimmed. The pressure dropped slightly. A breeze brushed his neck. The Seraphim itself exhaled. She raised one hand and pointed back the way they had come. Aaron followed her gaze. The spiral had inverted. It was no longer fall. It was ascent. The Seraphim rose. Behind him, the girl smiled. She touched the hull. Where her hand rested, light grew. Return did not feel like flight. The Seraphim did not burn through space or breach atmosphere. It unfolded. One frame peeled back after another, like memory surfacing from shock. The spiral that had once taken them inward now rewrote itself in reverse, curling back through encoded grief and unshed names. The girl stood at the center of the ship, barefoot, her presence rearranging matter. Where she walked, the metal grew warm. Where she paused, it glowed faintly with patterns that resembled neural filaments, branching like roots. Aaron Solari sat at the edge of the command ring, body rigid, eyes wide. The scar unspooled behind them, not shrinking, receding, a tide rolling back to expose what had been buried. No alarm sounded, no signal locks, but the forward view screen began to bloom with static forms. Structures reappeared, not as they had been, as they remembered being. The ark's sailless flickered into visibility. Not a transmission, a shape, a suggestion. Its hull wavered in intervals, as if still deciding whether to exist. Its exterior no longer showed its scars. No kinetic burns, no rust. Its banners were restored. The Mars crest rippled along its spine, pristine, colors rich and newly woven by whatever medium now coated fabric in the real. Within, Commander Vex stood in silence. She stared at a black screen that suddenly showed the Seraphim on approach. The feed wasn't routed through known channels. It simply appeared. Around her, the bridge flickered. Lights steadied. Systems reinitialized in cascading waves. One officer began to cry without knowing why. Another dropped to one knee, whispering names. Vex exhaled. They made it. She didn't know if she meant Aaron or something larger. The Seraphim passed into standard orbit without resistance. Time normalized slowly like thawing muscle. Aaron moved only when the girl did. She approached the cradle, touched its frame. The tendrils that once bound Ro stirred, then grew. New limbs of living fiber extended upward. They reached toward her, then stopped. She did not connect. Instead, she turned. "You'll have to carry it now," she said. Her voice did not resonate through the air. It resonated in understanding. Aaron blinked. His throat was dry. "What is it? What you left behind? What all of you did?" She raised her hand. The cradle bloomed open. From it emerged something that looked like light, but felt like presence. It coalesced into a spiral, hovering above the cradle. Not Ro, but what they had gathered. Every step, every loss. Not just preserved. Rooted. The spiral pulsed. Aaron reached out. The light did not resist. It entered him, not as heat or weight but as inheritance. It embedded itself along his neural spine, not to command but to grow. The Seraphim touched down on the ark's sailless outer ring. No escort, no signal beacons, just gravity, just permission. The hangar bay had not been opened manually. It was simply waiting. As Aaron stepped out of the ship, the deck beneath his boots shifted in tone, white to soft amber. Lights flared briefly overhead, then dimmed to a warm horizon hue. No klaxons, no weapon locks, only presence. When the hatch opened fully, Vex was already there. She did not wear armor. Only the coat of command and the bracelet of mourning her sister had once forged from copper scavenged on Ceres. She did not speak. She stepped forward and pulled him into her arms. He didn't cry. Not then. Not until he saw the corridor shift. The lights turned gold. The air tasted of spring. A child's laugh echoed from deeper in the station. Real. Not memory. He turned. The girl stood one last time, half light, half form. She smiled. Then she stepped backward. And the space she had occupied pixelated outward. Spiraling light fragments embedding into the walls, the floor, the deck systems. The ship breathed in response. And she was gone. In her place, the corridor now opened. Into a room that hadn't existed in years. A room that remembered him. The reconstructed space was not a copy. It was a reply. Aaron stepped into the chamber slowly. The walls were soft, fabric lined with diagrams, rough sketches pinned where he remembered drawing them. A photograph of Vex, younger. A map of Earth where the ocean had once been. All the things he had once buried. On the table, a tea set, Martian style, with a crack down the side of the pot he had never repaired. Someone had filled it. He sat down. The cup was warm. Across from him sat no one. But he felt a presence. Not watched. Accompanied. Elsewhere in the ark's systems reawakened. Corridors once closed to atmosphere now flowed with oxygen. Hydroponic tanks began cycling again, sprouting blooms that had not been seen since the first collapse. Seeds germinated in places they were never planted. In the gravity well beneath the comms tower, a maintenance drone paused mid-task. Turned upward. The sensor lens dilated. Then it spoke. Not recorded audio. A constructed voice. Home. The scar remained. But it no longer pulled. It waited. And at its edge something new took root. A structure not made. Grown. White towers spiraled from its inner horizon. Not bone. Not steel. Not code. Something new. They curled toward each other like blooming petals suspended in vacuum. Ships that had once vanished began to drift back toward orbit. Some damaged. Some whole. All marked with the same symbol. A spiral of light, nested in gold. The mark of return. The bloom had begun. And it would not end with one survivor. The girl did not return. But her imprint remained. Not as data. As memory shared. And wherever it rooted, the world began again. The garden grew in silence. It did not rise from soil or stone, nor sprout from designed infrastructure. It emerged where grief had settled longest. In airlocks where names had been whispered. In forgotten bunk corridors layered with dust and skin oil. In carbon-scored wreckage and shield-stressed plating. Wherever absence had lingered, color now returned. The scar had rooted itself in the architecture of loss. And from that root it bloomed. The bloom was not ornamental. It was structural. Aaron Solari knelt on a sunlit deck that hadn't seen warmth in decades. Beneath his hand, the floor pulsed faintly. Not electronic. Not mechanical. Biological. Alive. The light spiraled outward from his palm like a responsive tide. Around him, the walls of the Ark Salus had begun to reshape. Not uniformly. Not programmatically. But by memory. A cracked window had sealed itself not with glass, but with woven protein mesh. The corridor light grew dimmer near the officer's wing where too many last transmissions had been sent. A soft wind blew, though there were no vents. It felt like morning. And healing. He rose, walked slowly through the corridor, and turned into the upper greenhouse wing. What had once been a hydroponic system lay burst open, tendrils of rootstock climbing the frame. But these were not Terran species. The leaves bore asymmetric spines, and some unfurled in geometric tessellations that shimmered in changing hues. One stalk had a central core with nested blooms like bioluminescent shells, each pulsing to Aaron's footsteps. A translucent petal closed gently around a floating dust particle as he passed. Then Vex entered. The atmosphere changed. The nearest bloom recoiled slightly, then opened fully in slow, deliberate sequence. It emitted a harmonic tone deeper than the one it gave Aaron. "It's adapting to us," she said. Vex stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, not in distrust, but calculation. She stepped forward and touched one of the pulse lilies. It shimmered, then produced a sound like a hum, like breath through cloth. This isn't contamination, she said. It's intention. Aaron nodded. Memory, not infection. Vex touched the base of the stalk. The hum deepened. A second bloom opened nearby. Do you think it remembers Ro? Aaron turned. I think it is Ro. Down in the central well, beneath the comms tower, a gathering had formed. No one ordered it. No one announced. But they came. Pilots who had gone mute since the failed Endar push. Engineers who hadn't left their quarters in weeks. Children who had never walked past the barracks. They stood together in the atrium and watched the walls pulse. Words reappeared across the surface, not data. Names. Songs. Letters that had never been sent. One engineer recognized the script of a message she wrote to her brother the day he vanished. She stood with her hand against it for an hour. And above it all, projected from the old core array, a spiral of light. Not static. Not hologram. Living. It rotated slowly, pulsing to breath rhythms. Every few seconds it expanded and contracted as if remembering lungs. A child stepped forward. Touched it. The spiral paused. It flared once, bright and golden, then collapsed into her palm. Not vanished. Embedded. Her hand glowed for a moment. The light entered her skin and vanished beneath the surface. She looked up. Said nothing. But she smiled. Later, in the deep maintenance stacks, Vex and Aaron walked alone. It's going to spread, Vex said. It already has, Aaron replied. Not just here. The Seraphim was only the first seed. They passed under a damaged pylon. Beneath it, light streamed upward. And from the light, sound. Not voice. Music. Soft and unfamiliar. It brought Aaron to tears without reason. Vex reached over and touched his arm. You're not carrying it alone. He looked up. Neither are you. They stopped in front of an old hatch. Once sealed, now open. Within, a hollow space filled with tendrils of biolight and fragments of recovered objects, photographs, dog tags, pieces of cloth. The tendrils had gathered them like nest material. A memorial. Without construction. This isn't about resurrection, Vex whispered. Aaron agreed. It's inheritance. Beyond the arcs, near the edge of the scar, new structures had begun to rise. Built not by hand, but by resonance. Hollow shells spun in perfect gravity loops. Towers budded from asteroid surfaces like pollen reaching for light. Signals bled from old wreckage, now blinking in rhythmic cadences. A language forming, not spoken, but remembered. Scout teams sent to investigate found the interiors filled with breathable air. Temperature regulated. Materials warmed to the touch as if alive. One structure mirrored the internal layout of a destroyed colony ship lost 10 years prior, every room intact. No one had built it, but someone had remembered it. The girl's spiral appeared on each structure. Not painted. Not etched. Grown. In orbit around the scar, satellites long believed destroyed began to ping. Shortwave bursts. Old Earth dialects. Emergency broadcasts looped in forgotten tongues. But some messages were new. Messages from the scar. One loop played a lullaby last broadcast during the fall of Ceres' habitat. Another played the voice of Ro. I'm still here. Just quieter. The voice repeated every 9 minutes. But not all signals were voice. One satellite emitted laughter, childlike, looping. Another played piano keys pressed slowly, haltingly, as if someone were learning to play in real time. Then came a new signal never heard before. We remember you. Please stay. No one knew who said it. Aaron sat alone in the listening chamber, headphones pressed to his ears, tears tracking clean down skin lined by years. Outside, the scar shimmered. It was no longer black. It was silver, alive with shifting light. The galaxy had a wound. Now it had a garden. And soon it would have a voice. Sound returned before the voice. Not from speakers or intercoms. From everywhere. From metal struts. From polymer sheathing. From walls grown soft and spongy with memory. It vibrated like the resonance of something once buried, now unearthed. A chord long suppressed. One that had waited for mouths that could sing it again. The scar had found its throat. And the station sang. Aaron stood in the comms tower, now overgrown with spiraled filaments of biolight. Instruments had long since ceased responding to human commands. But now they responded to tone, to intent. The central pillar pulsed in rhythm with breath. The control panels no longer displayed data. They displayed emotion, colored fields of light that shifted with the proximity of memory. When Aaron placed his hand on one panel, a faint sound played through the hull. His daughter's laugh, recorded from a home long lost to orbital collapse. Vex stood opposite him, arms loose, shoulders drawn low with reverence. The station was breathing. A low harmony rolled up from the lower decks, not mechanical, not digital. Living sound. The vibration of grief finally made audible. Beneath it, a higher counterpoint. The voices of children singing. Not lyrics, shapes of sound. He touched the console. The walls of the tower shifted. Not with motion, with purpose. The upper dome parted. Stars poured in, and with them the light of other spirals. Dozens. Hundreds. A constellation of memory-born stations blooming from across the sector, each humming a different variation of the same sonic pattern. From orbit, they resembled a galactic iris, a networked blossom of luminous coils. The scar was broadcasting, but not language, resonance. On Ceres Minor, a rusted agricultural dome ignited in violet bloom. The air became breathable. Seeds decades dormant awoke and flowered into spirals that reached the ceiling. On the ice rift base at Mare Hypatia, the glaciers sang in harmonic crystals. Frequencies long thought seismic were now understood as deliberate rhythm, a frozen choir finally heard. On the wreck of the Pioneer route, lost for 20 years, the ship's engines restarted without command and played music through the vents. Crew logs began rewriting themselves into stanzas. All sang different parts of the same song, each listening to each other, each remembering a part the others forgot. The spiral wasn't central. It was distributed, a cognitive mesh of memory and tone. Not artificial, not divine, emergent. Inside the arcs, those sensitive to the bloom began to change. One boy, age 6, drew a schematic of a place he had never seen. It included floor plans, solar alignments, and material codes unknown to the databanks. The structure, when rendered, matched a habitat once theorized but never built. An old engineer began carving poems in a tongue that no AI could translate. The syntax mirrored Proto-Sanskrit and orbital pidgin, yet the meanings resonated emotionally if not semantically with all who heard it. 3 sleepwalkers gathered in the atrium at identical hours each night and sang without waking. Their tones altered the light. Walls grew softer. The air sweetened. A second spiral appeared beneath the floor, unseen but felt. A phantom geometry. Aaron did not try to control it. He did not try to understand it. He only listened. The music spread. Across planets. Across wrecks. Across beings who no longer had names. In a long-abandoned relay node beyond Hades' reach, 2 drones reactivated. They turned toward one another and began to move in mirrored arcs, inscribing loops into the dust. On Europa's broken shield array, light bent in spiral crescents against the ice. Shadows began to flicker in harmonic sequence. On Venusian cloud ships thought dead, rust peeled backward. Hulls grew new skin. The choir expanded, and it tuned itself. Back in the Ark Salus, Vex lowered herself to the floor of the tower. She closed her eyes and let the sound pass through her. The hum settled into her chest like an old weight remembered. "What is it becoming?" she asked aloud. Aaron sat across from her. The glow between them had intensified. A language, not for us, but from us. He didn't speak again, because then he heard it. Rose's voice, not broadcast, present. A whisper over the station's shared breath. "We're becoming." At the edge of the scar, where the bloom had first begun, a spiral tower completed its final coil. It no longer glowed, pulsed with thought. A shape appeared inside the tower. Tall, fluid. Not human, but formed from the residue of memory. A silhouette made of pasts. It opened its mouth. No sound emerged, but the galaxy listened, and the choir began. There was no frontier now. The edge of the scar had dissolved, not receded, not collapsed. Dissolved, as if it had never been a boundary but an interface. One mistaken for death, now understood as origin. The galaxy no longer mapped itself in cartographic coordinates but in resonant echoes. From that threshold, the final spiral rose. It did not announce itself. It did not form from matter. It bloomed from song. The Ark Salus had grown quiet. Not from silence. From arrival. The walls no longer pulsed unpredictably. The bioluminescent veins in the corridors shimmered with slow, steady rhythm. People did not rush. They moved with reverence. Even the children played softer, as if the station were listening, as if it were dreaming. And in that dream, something was being born. Aaron Solari walked the outer ring alone. A new arch had appeared beside the original starboard launch scaffold. He had not ordered it. No one had, but it had grown. Woven from memory fiber and carbon lattice, curved in exact replication of the hatchway where Ro had first emerged. The path beyond the arch no longer led to vacuum. It led to the spiral. The last one. Vex joined him at the threshold. She wore no armor. Only the dark blue coat of old Martian command, its hem stained and repaired in dozens of places. Across her wrist, a cuff grown from the bloom, a living band of soft biometal etched with Ro's voice print. "You don't have to go," she said. "I already did," Aaron replied. "This is the return." He reached for the arch. The moment his fingers brushed its inner edge, the world refracted. Not broken. Shifted. They stood on a platform of memory light. Above them, the scar shimmered not as wound, but as sky. Below, the spiral curved downward into infinity. Not architecture. Not machine. A spine. The walls of the spiral rotated with slowness, carved with ridges that pulsed in synchrony to their own hearts. Where one pulse misaligned, the spiral self-corrected, its bioluminescence dimming and brightening in harmonic realignment. He looked at Vex. Her mouth had parted slightly, eyes wide. Her hand rested against the cuff. And then they heard the others. From the depth of the spiral, voices rose. Not transmissions. Testimonies. One voice belonged to a miner lost on Helion Drift. Another to a pilot erased in the fall of the Borealis line. A third from a girl who had died before birth, speaking now with clarity and calm. Each voice braided into the next. The effect was not auditory, it was internal. Memory formed the resonance. The spiral carried not sound, but recognition. Each tone distinct. Together, they became the last spiral's call. Not a message. An invitation. And behind their harmony, the spiral itself responded. Not as choir, but as conductor. It shaped reality not by matter, but by need. Where grief lingered, structure rose. Where joy had once existed, light returned. Aaron stepped forward. The spiral did not resist. It folded around him, a living corridor of harmonic pressure. With every step, the surface beneath him displayed scenes not visual, not literal. Emotional landscapes. The weight of a father's guilt. The warmth of remembered laughter. The brief, cutting pain of leaving a home that would never return. He walked through a chamber of scent, old leather, engine grease, citrus peels. The sensory imprint of Ro's nest still encoded in the scar's synaptic mesh. It greeted him like a parent remembering the weight of a newborn. But none of it hurt. Not anymore. Vex followed. Her hand passed along the inner curve and it responded with light, her sister's face, whole and alive, her crew at rest, a starfield she had charted alone. The stars she had lost were restored in motion, spiraling past her eyes with precise trajectories as if time itself were remembering. They descended slowly. Together. At the spiral's core, they found the choir. Not gathered. Grown. Spiraled figures half light, half form stood in concentric rings. No eyes. No mouths. Only presence. Each one held a fragment of someone remembered. Not an identity. An impression. A kindness given. A sacrifice made. A name never spoken aloud. They did not sing. They were the song. And the song turned to face them. The central ring shifted. From it rose a single strand of spiraled light. It twined upward slowly as if choosing its shape moment by moment. The light was pale and soft, woven with flecks of embedded sound. Within it, the shape of a child emerged. The child. Not biological. Not spectral. The signal incarnate. But more, the synthesis of every lost thread Ro had carried. Not just the transmission. The reply. Her eyes held no fear. Only return. She raised her hand. Aaron placed his against it. For a moment, the entire spiral halted. The light folded inward. The voices quieted. The song ceased. Not ended. Transformed. The pressure of every lost voice condensed into a single breath. And exhaled. As it passed through Aaron, his skin shimmered with a faint spiral lattice, then faded. Across from him, Vex's breath left her in a quiet cloud of light. The spiral had marked them. Not with burden. With belonging. When they stepped back into the arcs, it was morning. Actual morning. A sun had risen over the scar. Not a metaphor. Not a hallucination. A G-class star formed from harmonic compression anchored in stable orbit by the memory field. Light bathed the arcs in warmth. It spread across the outer shell, refracting through the grown mesh of the station's new surface. Glass became prism. Steel became root. Birdsong echoed through corridors that had never housed birds. Not sampled audio. Instinctual memory encoded in the scar's new biosymphonic weave. The bloom was complete, and where the scar had once devoured, it now gave. Across other systems, similar suns ignited. Stable, harmonic, fusion bright. Not born of fusion cores or artificial stars. Formed through collective resonance. The choir's response to need. A message not sent, but answered. The choir became home, and the last spiral sang on.